I recently received a direct message on Twitter from a friend and thought leader who asked me if I memorize my stories and then tell them the same way every time. I thought you might have that question too. The answer is no. And if you're someone who's ever memorized a story and it just didn't go off the way you thought it would, this video will actually explain why, okay? First, I feel it's only fair to tell you that I did memorize a story once. I was 26 and invited to tell at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. It was huge. I'd been there once before, but this is the first time telling as an adult. And telling at the festival is one of the greatest honors any storyteller can receive. Many storytellers work their entire career and never get that invite. Not only that, but my 8-minute story was actually an audition. The audience of 500 or so librarians and educators and festival organizers, which was my intended career path at the time, would use that precious 8 minutes to determine whether or not they wanted to bring me into their school or a storytelling festival. So the stakes were high and I got to work. I chose a story and decided to perfect it. I wrote and recited and memorized every perfect little word, and eventually it was time to finally tell it. Now you might be thinking what happened was I drew a blank and made a complete fool of myself, but no, it was actually flawless. I said every word I had planned to say, and yet it was still bad. Later that evening, it was such a mystery to me. I tracked down my mentor, the great storyteller Donald Davis, who heard my lackluster story, and I asked him, what happened, Donald? And he looked at me and said, well, Kindra, you told the words. You didn't tell the story. And that is where you go wrong when you memorize a story. You try to memorize the words, and in the end, you just end up telling the words instead of the actual story. The audience, whomever that may be, can feel the disconnect, and so they disconnect. And you're left wondering, what the heck went wrong? Here is what you should do instead. Don't memorize the story. Instead, become more familiar with it. Don't memorize, familiarize. How? Tell it. Tell it more. Tell it informally to a friend and then tell it again to your mom over the phone, or casually work it into conversation at work with a colleague, or tell your spouse at dinner and then say it out loud to yourself in the car or in the shower. Each time you tell the story, you will carve it a little bit deeper into your brain. You'll know what works and what doesn't, and eventually you won't have to memorize it at all. You'll just remember it. That's what I encourage my friend on Twitter to do who asked the question, and what I encourage you to do as well. As I look back on that story in Jonesboro, I do it with some regret. It really would have been incredible to nail that 8 minutes. But then again, I probably would be telling stories in a school right now instead of sitting here and talking to you. And I really like talking to you. So remember, if you memorize anything, it is this. Don't memorize. Familiarize. Okay? That's it. Thanks as always for watching. Pass this on to a friend if you think that they could use it, and I hope I get to see you again very soon.